I don't see you.
We are live.
We're live with Playing to Win,
Spotlight.
but we can't see. Let me go. Boop, 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 boop.
How do I get us in there? Oh, there we go.
Hey,
That's
you
how you
clicked the
do
right
it.
button. You clicked the
Ah.
right button.
So I guess I need to make sure we're live. And is it on the feeds? And
So the feed is going, but it's doing a countdown.
okay, because it's scheduled.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we will. Okay. Okay. So we got about 20 seconds, and then we're going to kick it off. And Mark, I assume we'll kick off the same way that we did last time, and let you start it with your smoothing baritones from
Right.
North Houston. Oh, I forgot to turn my lamp on. Gosh dang it.
No, I gotta do that. Okay, how do I get this to go away? It's 8:30. Are we live? Does it say we're live?
It says we're live.
Oh, let's say we're live. All right. This is Playing to Win with me, Mark Henderson Leary, and my good friend
Brad Freyer. And we're looking forward to having everybody join us today and talking about some exciting topics, or at least topics that we find exciting.
Exciting to
So,
us. That's all that matters.
that's all that matters.
That's what they say. As long as we look like we're having a good time, then that means it's that's what people want to see.
Well, you and I don't think have had a conversation and it not have been fun. So I think we're in good shape there.
At least for us. And
Yeah.
so the context of this, as I adjust my headphones with my COVID hair, is that this whole premise of this conversation is businesses encounter what I describe as the universal business problem, which is to say we're not selling enough or something in the revenue side of things. But as we dig in, we find that sometimes it's not just a selling problem, or sometimes it is. And then trying to understand whether it's a core identity or a business process or efficiency or a service quality or who knows what, or is it just simply a sales technique? That can be a little bit daunting. So we're going to kind of continue to unwind those things at how to grow the revenue and how to understand from a business owner's or sales leader's perspective, where do we really diagnose and how do we get make some ground. So, man, I wanted to kick this
Perfect.
off with this question that you and I kind of briefly talked about. One of the things that we prescribe, and you certainly prescribe, well, we prescribe because you taught me to make sure we listen well, and in our conversations, we don't want to give the answers to our prospects early on in the process. We want to hear what their problems are. And my
Right.
concern is that if you listen to what they want, you can tell them exactly what they asked for, even if you don't mean it. And it creates a potential, I think, for a salesperson to be inauthentic and create a problem. What's your response to that?
Man, you loaded it up on the front end, just right out of the gate. Hit him
Yeah,
with the
Mr.
hit him with the
Mr.
two by
President,
four.
what's your response to that? You have 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Well, it's huge. Yeah, no, I mean that's a very valid question, because I think salespeople historically have this sense that if they're in a conversation, it's up to them to turn it into a sales opportunity. And as you and I both know, we sit in front of a lot of prospects, actually a lot of suspects, and try to turn them into prospects. But not everybody's a good fit. Not everybody that we talk to has the qualifications, nor do we have the qualifications to help them. And so, what we have to figure out is how do we help salespeople recognize that they don't have to force every opportunity into the pipeline. And I think that's where the problem starts for salespeople is they feel like they have to close every situation they sit in front of. And so, regardless of what the prospect tells them, they're going to try to figure out a way to make it fit. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And whether it's intentionally unethical or intentionally manipulative, I don't know. But I do get the sense, and I've even been on some sales calls, and one immediately comes to mind. Is it too early for a story? Okay, I'll tell the story.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was.
I've got some technical things that are getting my distraction. So you got the show while I'm figuring this thing out a little bit.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I had a client that I was doing ride-alongs with a couple of years ago, and one of their senior reps invited me to go on a couple of sales calls with him. And as we're driving out to the appointment, He was telling me, oh man, I just love Sandler training. I just love the submarine. I'm a huge fan of the upfront contracts and pain. And, it just makes so much sense. And I just use it all the time. And he's just overselling how much he enjoys doing the Sandler training. So we get out on the sales call, and he and I pre-call plan what we were going to do, what the process is going to be, what my role is, his role, all that good stuff. And we sit down and the guy starts asking questions, but he asks questions like this. Hey, Mark, wouldn't it make sense for you to try to save money for your organization? To which the prospect was like, well, yeah. Well, I mean, wouldn't you agree that you would like to be more effective in your business?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Yeah. And so he asked all these not all these, he asked like 4 or 5 leading questions. The only answer is yes. And so then he goes into his dissertation about, what he does and how great he is and da 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 da. And at the end, he tells the prospect, well, look, I tell you what, why don't I work up a proposal for you, create a recommendation on what we've talked about today, and I'll get it in your hands. And when do you think you might be able to have a decision? And the prospect was like, well, let me look it over and I'll get back to you next week. So the salesperson closes up his binder. We walk out. And usually in these ride-alongs, I do coaching right afterwards in the car. But the call was so bad and so counter to anything we'd ever talked about, I was concerned that the guy would be completely unresponsive to any coaching. So I said, how do you think it went? And he goes, oh, man, it was awesome. Great sales call. I said, really? He goes, yeah. I said, okay, well, tell me what you thought was so great. I said, tell me this. Do you think he was a qualified prospect? And he lit up. He's like, absolutely. Huge qualified prospect. I said, okay, why do you think that? And he looked at me like all puzzled and perplexed. He's like, well, you heard him. He said he wanted to be more efficient. He wanted to make more money. And I was like, oh, geez. So I said, did he say that? Or did you just ask the questions and he just responded affirmatively? Oh, no. This is all him. So his awareness was so low on the chart. I asked him, I said, what do you think the probability of success is on this opportunity? He goes, oh, I'd say 85% probability. All right. So what's your next step? I'm going to work up a proposal for him. I'm going to get it to him by the end of the week. He's going to let me know next week. I said, all right. I said, I bet you a lunch you never hear back from him ever again.
Where'd you guys eat?
Exactly. Steakhouse. Yeah. But it was, so whenever I say, I don't think salespeople do it with the intent of manipulation or with a lack of morality. I think there's a lack of awareness. I think, like in this sales guy's situation, he was just unaware of how his questions were 100% leading and how at the end of the conversation, he had learned nothing about the prospect because he had planted everything. In fact, there's a good chance that he was taught that at some point in his sales career, right? I've had salespeople tell me, Brad, I was told you have to ask questions that get them to answer in the affirmative, because as long as you can get them nodding and saying yes to you, that leads to saying yes to buying. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense at all.
Well, yeah. So I here's what I've figured out about that. And I think there is high pressure selling. I think high pressure selling is a thing when you can close the endpoint. I think you can kind of get somebody to say yes, and where they get this sort of internal friction of, I did say yes. I guess it is affordable. I guess it is more important than that thing that the person tricked me into feeling. And what that does is it creates an internal conflict that if you can get them to sign right there and buy that used car, you win. You can buy that TV if you've got an endpoint. But if there is not an endpoint, it's a complex sale, and they're going to have an opportunity to talk it over with their friend and their spouse and their business partner, and somebody says, no, that's crazy. You're not going to win that sale, and you have to kind of go the other way. And It's almost like you go, we talk about this in Sandler or you talk about this in Sandler, and I refer to it in Sandler, and Chris Voss talks about it. He's like, get them to say no. Figure out how to get them to say no and get them swinging the other way. Chris Voss with the Never Split the Difference, hostage negotiator. And he's like, he goes the other way. He says something like, would it be crazy would it be totally insane to think that we could find a budget for this? Is that impossible? Well, no, it's not impossible. Okay, all right, let's talk about that.
I haven't heard that. I like that. I like that question. I haven't heard it delivered that way. That's a good one. I like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's the impossibility scenario, and you work back from there, and you say,
Yeah.
well, and it's really great to get people kind of collaborating.
Yeah.
But to the essence of this, I do think that you can get sales techniques that put you in a lot of psychological power, and I do think that it is oftentimes tricky when you get an innocent or uninitiated or young or just overly money motivated sales rep in possession of some of these techniques. Like, go listen to them and ask them what they need. And if they actually get it right, and they actually let the prospect say, well, we would need to come under here, and this is the kind of thing we need to be, and you need to be on site, and it's 4 days a week. Like, okay, all right, here we go. Here's 4 days a week. It's on site. It's whatever. And you bring it back, and you're like, well, we don't do on site, or on site's not that price. That's not workable. And really coming back to a balance of, I have heard, I mean, I think that the highest level of excellence in this is, I've heard you say that price matters more than anything else, and speed. And say, well, and we've thought about it, and we are thorough, and we are not necessarily speedy. Quality is our number one thing, and price is nowhere on our list. And so if thoroughness is not what you're after, I probably would be better served to get you introduced to somebody else. How, do you that ethically high point, is that something that you encounter, or how do you teach that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is something that we experience. I mean, we practice it. I know you practice it, and I think any high performing sales organization recognizes that that's the end game, to get their salespeople to that point where, I mean, in the Sandler submarine, the qualifying components are pain, budget, and decision, right? What's the compelling motivation to buy? What are they willing and able to invest in time, money, and resources? And what's their decision-making process look like? At the end of the day, if you can objectively have a conversation with someone and check off each one of those boxes, then it makes sense to advance the ball. But if at any point any one of those boxes doesn't get filled, or you can't check in that box, then you have to do exactly what you said, which is, hey, look, we're not a good fit. So I do think, 100% believe it can be taught, but I also think that there's a level of attitudinal belief about the individual salesperson that drives some of that ability, right? I mean, think about what does a salesperson have to be able to feel or think to sit in front of a prospect and tell them, you know what, we might not be a good fit for you. In fact, I may need to direct you somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think you hit a really big point there, and I've the challenge I see in business and in life is that the problem I'm experiencing today is probably a problem I created 3 months or 3 years ago, but probably not as much in that moment. If it's something so, I mean, I make tactical mistakes. I think and talk quickly enough to make plenty of in the moment problems for myself. But really, if we're talking about a sales situation, it's like, well, our sales reps, they're not closing. Is that because I didn't give them the right closing lines? Or is that because I didn't hire the right sales force? Or if I did hire the right sales force, did I train them properly on what our strengths are? What is the core focus of our business? And maybe even before that, did we even ask ourselves what we're great at? Because I do think it is easier if your organization is steeped in your core values and your core focus. You know what you're playing at the highest level to win, what your skills are, and you go out and you send people out into the workforce into the prospecting world. There's a click. They're like, oh, you're not shouldn't be on our team. This person seems like they've got money, but I don't feel it. I don't think they buy what we sell, and that's much easier to do as opposed to. I mean, how often do you find business owners who just sort of scoop up 1 to 5 sales reps thinking that there's like magic dust, and they just sort of unleash them on the world and say, go sell?
I mean, I don't know that there's a harder job to fill than a salesperson, because most people don't understand sales. When you're hiring if you're hiring someone to work in your accounts receivables department, when you look at that resume, you can see that they have account receivable experience. You can test them on procedures. whenever you put them into that role, you have very specific job functions. Here's your tasks, here's when they're due, here's how you do it. And if they screw up along the way, you write them up. If they continue to screw up, you write them up twice and then you let them go. But it's very clear what the job function is and how to perform it correctly. Sales is one of those jobs that people for a long time have just been like, look, hire somebody you believe is going to be a good salesperson, turn them loose and don't ask them questions, right? They're kind of temperamental. They're a little sensitive, so don't ask them what they did today because they're just going to blow up and say, well, if you want to do it, you do it. So they do. We hire salespeople based off of interviews and resumes and potentially a Rolodex, and then we let them loose and we hope for the best. And the problem is, I've interviewed probably 1,000 salespeople for clients over the years, and I can count on one hand how many bad interviews have been conducted. Meaning, salespeople are great interviewers. And you sit in front of them and they're going to tell you what you want to hear and you're going to walk out feeling good about them. I have only had a handful of interviews that I've just been like, you know what, let's just go ahead and cut this short because this is a waste of our time. Most of them you have to, read the tea leaves and look at the resume and look at assessments and ask deeper probing questions because, salespeople are tough to hire well for.
Well, and it's a very tough problem for entrepreneurs who don't come from a sales background. Like they themselves are not sales reps or sales managers.
Well, but I'd even challenge that because I had a conversation last night with a small business, and the business owner is the number one producing sales guy, and he keeps trying to hire salespeople. But what is he trying to hire? He's trying to hire himself. Yeah, and he won't. He can't. And that's what I had to explain to him. I was like, you won't replace you. You've got to find someone and let's create a process that they can follow because they can't just, go on a sales call with you, watch what you do and duplicate that. That's just impossible. But I think we've taken a 90-degree, and this is going to happen to you and I. Where did we start today at, Mark?
We started with how to make sure you're listening well and not telling the client, customer, prospect what they want to hear. Tell them what they need to hear and what's real.
There we go. All right.
But this is right. This is on the same path because I do think that it's in the DNA. I do think tactically you work backwards. You say listen to them mostly. Do not propose anything till you're sure you know what they need and what they want. And that's certainly what your example was. Then you got to come behind that and say and don't propose anything that we're not going to be great at. And make sure that they're the right fit, and if they're not, be honest. Yeah. And that is on a transactional basis pretty manageable, but on a cultural basis, if you got 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 reps out there, you might have a problem that's below the level, below the surface. You might not have the right sales management. You might not have the right language in the culture to inform your sales reps what a good prospect looks like.
Yeah. Well, and I've got, in addition to doing Sandler, I own a piece of a manufacturing company that I ran for 4.5 years. And we've had outside salespeople in the past that they drag everything into the shop to see if we can make it. Right? Hey, can we make this? Because they just want to sell something, and they're just always, and it does. It's exhausting and it wears you out. And so if you've got people that are dragging stuff in that's not a good fit, it is a huge waste of the salesperson's time. It's a huge waste of internal staff time, a huge waste of management's time.
Well, so let's talk to that because I think it's the exact same case. So, because if you just pure on the 70, 30, 80, 20, there you ask questions and they talk and you listen. As a good sales rep, you're listening all the time. You could come back like, I know I got millions of dollars of opportunities because these people need me to make these things, and you would be like, well, we don't make those things. We don't have that piece of equipment. Well, stop leading them to believe that we can do that, and stop bringing their stuff back here. How did you educate that sales team to understand what was good and what was not?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one is making sure that they're trained in advance before they go out and hit the field. And so our ideal situation is to bring a salesperson in and allow them to work in the shop for a period of time. And look, my first sales job right out of college, the best thing that happened to me was that they took me and put me in the fulfillment center. And I worked there for, I don't remember, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And not only did it teach me everything soup to nuts about the product, but also how it was processed through and how it worked. But I also got to know all those people. So whenever I needed help, they were
Yeah, yeah.
they liked me and were willing to support. So one is education, right? Just making sure that we're not sending them out in the field too hastily, at the risk of them going out uneducated. But the other thing you've mentioned several times today, which I'm firm believer in, the 70-30 or 80-20 rule, right? We talk 20%, listen 80, but salespeople don't often have a good process or linear questions to ask that fill up 80% of the time, right? They've got
Right.
3 or 4 questions and then they're all out. And so then what they default and fall back on talking about themselves and the company and their products and services. And so I think giving your salespeople the right tools to be able to go out and have meaningful conversations and knowing what questions to ask and being able to keep someone engaged for 30, 45, 60, 90 minutes, is not easy. In fact, one of the attributes I really look for, especially in high level sales, is mental agility. And mental agility is that ability to reply to what someone says, as opposed to, while they're talking, thinking about what next question I'm going to ask. Right? And so it's that rapid brain fire. So instead of me thinking about what path I'm going down, I'm going to genuinely focus and listen to what you had to say. And then based on where I know I'm going, I'll ask my next question.
Well, so that sounds like a pretty high burden to get a good sales rep, especially right now. So we've got a huge dynamic of wanting to sell, needing to adapt to different customer needs. I spent a lot of time on the last stream, on the last show, talking about that concept that how do you get close? And that was a major theme, I think. How do you get back to the mind and the heart of your customers, who may have different needs now, and you may not have checked in a long time. So now we're looking at the reps and trying to figure out how do you get your reps to listen well and know what to do with that. The bar is pretty high right now, because they might be getting, instead of I need more widgets and this kind of widget, they're like, well, I need compassion. I need some a little bit of time on the payment. Can you trust me? I got a lot of orders, but I'm a little slower on this, or it goes a little deeper now a lot of times. And I've seen a lot of people, if not to get too tactical on this, but sometimes, like, if your customer suddenly can't pay and you happen to have a lot of money, you might be able to really, if you can trust them and you can do good credit checking and you can say, hey, you know what, we know that this is going to be good. You're going to be good for it. We can work together here. And I've seen that happen, where some people are like, we're not really hurting for the cash and we know you're good for it. And we see why you're slow. That kind of conversation isn't going to come through a rep well, maybe it might come through a rep, but it has a lot of potential for error and challenge.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think terms are a difficult one, and I won't even begin to coach on that. That's probably more in your bailiwick, as far as your total comprehensive understanding of businesses. But yeah, I would say that having those meaningful conversations, and it does dovetail nicely off of what we talked about last week, as far as just asking questions and listening with, to your point, listening with empathy, right? Because it's one thing to ask and just have a conversation and, okay, well, okay. So Mark, tell me, how's this affecting your business? Oh, Brad, we're being decimated. We're getting, okay, great. Thanks. So what about just
question 3?
Question 3. Check.
Yeah.
Wow. But speaking with empathy, and I think that's where part of that mental agility comes in, because when someone's speaking about emotional topics, it's being in the trenches with them. Man, Mark, I'm sorry to hear that you guys are being decimated. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about that? Help me understand. What's the experience you're having? How's that feeling? And just being in it with them, and make it feel like you're an ally, or a I don't know, plug in any word that's synonymous with ally,
or not trying to sell them something.
That's Yeah. Perfect. Well said.
And that's I think there's for me I can speak to this, and I suspect a lot of people have this problem as well. They're prospects to me at some point, even friends, or and that's a whole other topic. We could talk about that, doing business with friends, and because that's tricky, and and it's not great. Unless you really, but anyway, that's a whole other, like I said, whole other topic. But so I'm talking to somebody who I just a minute ago, or they expressed interest, and I've got kind of a business inertia or a thinking that this could just be money for me, and now I'm trying to be concerned. I am actually concerned, and I am trying to show concern on a human level. And now I'm kind of wondering, is he or she going to think I'm selling him something? And how do I have a conversation that really creates some safety around, I just want to know what's up. And then furthermore, like once you get there, I've had it go both ways where it's like, that sounds really hard. And, tell me more about that. And then the conversation. I've worked with people who were out of work, people who are potentially going to refer me in, and then now they're out of work, and then now they get a job, and it's like, well, great, that sounds awesome, and it's like, well, now I got to flip the switch back. Let me know how I can help. And so it's really kind of tricky to keep myself feeling super clean that like that was a genuine conversation, and there could be commercial engagement here as well. How do you tell people to navigate that line?
Well, I mean, I think you hit on something that's really important, right? And it's just it's that genuine empathy and the genuine interest and curiosity in the person that you're talking to. If you go into every opportunity, I mean, I can say for me personally, I go into most conversations as a cynic and a skeptic. And I
believe that. I believe that about you, Brad.
Yeah. I mean, I have horrible cynicism and skepticism when it comes into selling opportunities. What I mean by that is I go in thinking not likely going to go anywhere, not going to put any pressure on this conversation. I'm going to go in and just talk. Worst case scenario, I walk out with a relationship with somebody I didn't have a relationship with before. Okay. Right. So I've expanded my sphere of influence a little bit. And so whenever I go in with that cynicism and skepticism, it takes all the pressure off of me from feeling like I have to ask the right question at the right time to close the deal. And so I go in with a very open mind and with no plan I have a plan, but with no expectation to be closing the business. And Dev, this makes full circle back around to where we started the morning. If salespeople are going into these conversations and thinking that every dialogue they have has to turn into a sale, they're going to behave in a manner consistent with that. They're going to be overly assertive. They're going to be trying to push the round peg into the square hole, or to where you started this conversation, Mark. They're going to come out of that conversation having heard what they want to hear, to feel like they've got an opportunity to advance the ball on. And I think that's where a lot of the mismatches come in. If my sales guy is trying to sell something come hell or high water, he's going to be listening for any and every slight opportunity. Yeah. And he's going to latch onto it. He's going to drag it back and go, okay, here's what I got. And we need to quote it. We need to do a proposal. We need to do a delivery on it. And then, operations says, we don't even do that. What is that? Well, at least sales can say, well, I brought the opportunity. They couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about feeling like they're.
Yeah. So to summarize kind of what I've learned from this, and it's interesting, these are things that I already know, but it's nice to be able to put these things, know them in unusable kind of below the surface ways. And now I can kind of, I hopefully put into words what the question and answer are together. And that is that when you listen, you are not listening to sell. You are listening to hear what they need so you can get them into the right solution and understand whether you are it or not. And so you have to really complete the sentence. Like, why are you listening? Because you need to help them with the best solution.
Now, Mark, I'm gonna throw a penalty flag on this play right here. Did you come into this conversation with that already teed up?
I did not.
Because that was solid. I even wrote that one down. We're not we're not listening to sell. That I like that a lot. I like that. I think I can use that. Was really good. Yeah, and I think that summarizes it really nicely. That was well done.
Well, I'll tell you what. I appreciate you saying that. When I'm on the podcast and when I'm doing this, you can make a lot of assumptions as to why I'm doing this. But the truth is, I'm doing this to learn. I am listening very carefully, and I ask the questions. I wish it was because I knew the answers and I'm just trying to tee them up for the audience. The truth is I'm a little confused a lot of the time, and I'm trying to get less confused. And so it's been helpful. It's always helpful. And I have a lot of these conversations in the podcast and I go, I get it now. And they're like, did you tee that? No, I really didn't have any idea. I really was a little lost.
Well, I mean, no, and for me, there was two big takeaways. Number one is that quote. We're not listening to sell. In fact, I'm teaching bonding and rapport this afternoon, and I'm going to figure out a good place to insert that quote. But the other one I really liked was man. I'm guessing there's no way we're going to be able to figure out a budget for this thing.
Oh yeah.
Doing the negative budget sell.
It's impossible. Just
impossible.
It would be impossible. It would be, yeah. And if you want the absolute authority on crazy no questions and negotiation, it is Chris Voss, the guy who wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. And so you get him to say no as soon as possible, and in terms of like what's out of range, and work from there. Give them some. It's back to it's all Sandler aligned, just to give them power, make sure they understand that you're not pushing them someplace that they don't want to be.
Right.
But we're up against the hour, and so it clicked off fast. We got to move on, let people get on with their day, selling and creating and running businesses and the things they do. And so for next time, I think I've got a couple of questions, not the least of which is some real sales technique things. For me, I'd love to get to the bottom of the question of, am I interrupting you? And is now a good time? Because, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be a high pressure sales guy, but I've been told that, you never ask if it now's a good time. We can cover that next time.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody that joined in today. Hopefully you found some value in this. If you're watching it as a recording, don't forget to catch us the next live stream, which is going to be next Tuesday. That's election day.
Of course it is.
Of course it is.
We did that on purpose.
Intentionally, because we wanted to give you something else to pay attention to than the election next Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning.
Awesome.
So dial in next week.
And we'll see you then. Thanks.
Y'all be well.